Can Zhen Huan, blessed with both beauty and talent, truly outshine all in the imperial harem and enjoy everlasting favor? It was as if I had fallen into an endless dream. Lady Miaoying was before me, along with Lady Li Gu, Chao Jieyu, and Lady Xihua. I struggled, entangled, peeled away, turning over and over, unable to escape. Mother, I want to go home. Mother, I'm so tired, I don't want to wake up. Why does it hurt so much? A bitter and warm liquid was poured into my mouth, forcing me to awaken from the dream. It took tremendous effort just to open my eyes. The red silk canopy above me, embroidered with auspicious patterns of many suns and many blessings, was in the sleeping chamber of my palace. My body felt a momentary softness, finally in my own palace. Glancing slightly to the side, I caught sight of a strip of bright yellow, dazzling like the sun, which eased my heart, and tears fell involuntarily. Seeing me awake, he was also overjoyed, holding my hand, earnestly saying, "Huan Huan, you're finally awake." The empress behind him also heaved a long sigh of relief. "Thank heavens, it's good that you're awake. You've been unconscious for 3 days." Breathing with a cold and sharp pain, as if tiny blades were cutting inside. That pain gradually brought back my clarity. It seemed like centuries since I last spoke, and it was very hard to speak. "Fourth brother, you've returned." Tears flowed before words, as if to express all the grievances and physical pain endured since our separation. He became flustered, clumsily wiping my tears. "Huan Huan, don't cry. I've already wronged you." His eyes were full of deep sorrow and sadness. For no reason, that look in his eyes scared and panicked me. 1,000 fearful thoughts crossed my mind, and I dared not, but finally I stretched out my hand, cautiously touching my lower abdomen, where my cherished treasure was. However, almost overnight, the slight bulge had returned to being flat. I turned my eyes in fright, and every face was filled with sorrow. Precisely, I could already smell the lingering, surging dark red scent of blood in the air, which not even the strong smell of medicinal herbs could cover. My fingers stiffened and curled up. I couldn't believe it, it was gone, no longer inside me. I don't know where the strength came from, but I almost turned over and sat up straight. Everyone panicked, clumsily pressing down on me, fearing I would do something foolish. My heart and lungs were filled with frantic, heartbreaking sadness. I almost wailed loudly, fiercely grasping the front of his robe. Xianling held me tightly, just silent. After a few days apart, his eyes were full of bloodshot, and his bluish stubble made him look even more haggard. Consort Jing, wiping her tears on the side, tried her best to persuade. "Sister, don't be so sad. The emperor is also sad." Something big happened just as the imperial carriage arrived in Songzhou, and the emperor rushed back overnight. In Xianling's eyes was endless pity, intertwined with indescribable pain. He had never looked at me or held me in such a way before. Such profound sadness and despair were as if what was lost was not an unborn child, but everything he held dear and valued the most. The consecutive losses of his children seemed to make his grief even greater than mine at that moment. Xianling held me tightly, his expression seemingly lost and desolate. He looked at the empress with almost utter despair and weakness. "Is heaven punishing me?" Hearing this, the empress was deeply shaken. In just a moment, her gaze became determined and resilient. She quickly wiped away her tears and walked steadily to Xianling, kneeling before him and holding his hands in hers. The empress looked at Xianling calmly, solemnly saying word by word, "Your Majesty is the Son of Heaven, and heaven will not punish you or your offspring. Moreover, your Majesty has never been wrong, so there is no talk of punishment." She paused for a moment, then comforted and affirmed Xianling, "If there is any punishment, it is all my fault, and it has nothing to do with your Majesty." I was confused by her words, but I had no time to care or understand them. Xianling seemed greatly comforted, and his complexion slightly improved. I was crying so hard that my voice was choked, and my hair was sticky with sweat, my body shaking violently. The empress said, "Your Majesty, now is not the time to be sad. The miscarriage of consort Guan was not a natural disaster, but rather..." Reminded by the empress, I suddenly came to my senses, and the scenes in Mixiu Palace flashed before my eyes. Overwhelmed with grief and anger, I said hatefully, "Your Majesty, if natural disasters cannot be defied, can't they at least be prevented?" Xianling's expression turned dark as iron, and he looked around coldly, saying, "Where is the vile one?" Li Zhang hurriedly stepped forward. Lady Xihua is kneeling outside the Tongli Palace, awaiting punishment. Xianling's expression froze like ice. Summon her. Upon seeing her, I had no more tears left. I looked at her coldly, grinding my teeth in hatred, as if flames were about to shoot from my eyes, filled with murderous intent. If I had an arrow in hand, I would surely shoot it through her skull to vent my anger, but in the end I could only clench the corner of the blanket tightly in my hand. Lady Xihua was also haggard, her face marred by tear stains, no longer the charming beauty of before. She dared not look at me, and as soon as she entered, she knelt down and sobbed incessantly. Before Xianling could speak, she cried, "I am guilty. But that day, Consort Guan defied me, and I only wanted to administer a small punishment as a warning, not intending to harm Consort Guan's pregnancy. I did not know it would come to this. Please forgive my ignorance, Your Majesty." Xianling inhaled sharply, veins bulging on his forehead. "You were ignorant? Huan was already 4 months pregnant. Did you not know?" Lady Xihua had never seen Xianling so furious, and she was frightened into silence, tears falling. Consort Jing could not hold back any longer and said, "What lady is saying is that Consort Guan was already 4 months pregnant, and the fetus was stable, so kneeling should not have been a problem." Lady Xihua was terrified, crawling on her knees to Xianling's feet, sobbing, "I was ignorant. I was blinded by anger that day, and I thought kneeling for half an hour would not matter." She suddenly panicked, pointing at the standing physician Zhang and accusing, "What kind of physician are you? She was 4 months pregnant. How could kneeling for half an hour cause a miscarriage? It must be something you gave her that was wrong, and now you're blaming it on me." Zhang was intimidated by her vehemence, shaking his sleeves and responding, "Consort Guan did show signs of unease due to the fetus, which was due to her frail health, but that is normal. The only issue was Consort Guan's excessive anxiety, which made her pulse unstable. This was not a serious problem, as long as she rested well." Xianling roared at Lady Xihua, "Silence! Your excessive intentions were only due to your constant suppression. If you had been more tolerant, how could it have come to this?" Lady Xihua's voice grew weaker. "I heard that in the past, the virtuous concubine knelt for 2 hours before miscarrying, so I thought half an hour would not matter. That was something from the distant past," and Xianling had no time to recall it, while the Empress paused, then remained silent. Xianling continued, "The virtuous concubine was disrespectful to the late Empress, who then punished her to kneel and admit her mistakes. Moreover, the late Empress did not know of the virtuous concubine's pregnancy until afterwards. And you, knowing that Consort Guan was carrying the dragon's offspring." He paused, his tone growing heavier. "How dare you compare yourself to the late Empress?" Lady Xihua, realizing her mistake, was too frightened to say more. Xianling grew increasingly angry, glaring at her with disgust. "I see you not as ignorant but as extremely vicious. If Consort Guan was truly at fault, why didn't you punish her earlier instead of waiting until the midday sun was at its harshest? It's clear your thoughts are as venomous as a viper. How can I allow someone like you near me?" Lady Xihua collapsed to the ground, pale as death, and it took her a long while to start crying loudly, clinging to Xianling's robe, crying out, "Your Majesty, I admit I was displeased with Consort Guan. Since she entered the palace, you have not favored me as before. Moreover, I heard that the Zhen family often opposes my father and brothers, causing many conflicts. My father and brothers have contributed to the state. How can they tolerate being slighted by juniors? And I cannot bear it either." Her words grew more agitated, and she fixed her gaze on me. The Empress was both angry and sighed. "You're truly foolish. No matter how many disputes there are in the court, how can we in the harem be involved? Moreover, if your family has conflicts with Consort Guan's family, you should strive for harmony. How can you stir up trouble and make things difficult for Consort Guan out of personal feelings? It's a waste of the Emperor's trust in you, allowing you to manage the affairs of the harem." With each word from the Empress, Xianling's face grew darker. By the end, he was nearly bursting with rage. Lady Xihua, used to being domineering, never took the Empress seriously and ignored her, continuing to cry to Xianling, "I was dissatisfied with Consort Guan's arrogant behavior, but I truly did not intend to harm her child." She cried bitterly. I have also lost a child before. How could I be so heartless? Hearing this, Xianling's initially disgusted and disdainful look suddenly softened, filled with pain, guilt, sympathy, pity, and caution. After a long while, he said mournfully, Do not do unto others what you do not want done to yourself. You have experienced the pain of losing a child. How could you bear to inflict that on consort Guan? Xianling waved his hands repeatedly, his tone filled with sorrow. Even if you did not intend to harm the child in consort Guan's womb, the child is gone because of you. You cannot escape blame. I cannot tolerate someone with a heart of a viper like you any longer. He instructed the empress. Announce to the harem, demote Lady Murong, strip her of her title, remove her from managing the harem affairs, and demote her to consort. She is not to be seen without an edict. The empress agreed, then hesitated slightly. Should we inform the Dowager Empress? Xianling waved his hand wearily. The Dowager Empress is already saddened by the loss of consort Tian's child, and now she is ill. It would only add insult to injury. Let's not mention it for now. The Empress softly agreed. I will take care of everything regarding the Dowager Empress, Your Majesty, do not worry. Lady Xihua was struck as if by lightning, her hand still desperately clinging to Xianling's lower leg. As she attempted to cry and plead again, Xianling kicked her hands away and coldly laughed. What fault does consort Guan bear? What fault do the concubines and consorts of the 6 palaces bear to be exposed to the scorching sun alongside consort Guan? You too should kneel on the brick ground outside your palace gate for 2 hours. He turned and did not look at her again until she was dragged away. Xianling said, You all may leave now. I will stay with consort Guan. The empress nodded. That is good. She then advised me, You should take good care of yourself. Your own health is the most important. There will be plenty of time in the future. Then she let everyone out, and the hall became quiet. He gently held me and softly sighed. If it hadn't been for my 6th brother rescuing you from Misho Palace and sending someone to inform me in time, who knows how much worse things could have gotten. I was momentarily stunned, recalling the firm embrace that took me away from Misho Palace. My heart stirred. Not expecting it was really him. However, I quickly regained my composure, looking at Xianling with tears streaming down, angrily and sorrowfully saying, Things have already become so terrible, what more could happen? Xianling gently comforted. Don't be sad, you're still young. Once you've recovered, we can have another child. I remained silent for a long while before asking, May I ask your majesty, did my child die in vain? I paused, a hard edge of hatred in my voice. Why not kill that vile woman to vent this hatred? His eyes filled with shadows, and after a long sigh he said, The court affairs are difficult. At this moment, I cannot disregard the king of Runan and the Murong family. My heart chilled, disbelief and disappointment surging to my throat, and without thinking I blurted out, She killed your majesty's own child. I sat motionless, tears silently and continuously falling like beads. The tears soaked his clothes and he just silently held me, his eyes full of bewildered sadness, almost like a bottomless deep pool, staring blankly at me. After a long time he said, I couldn't keep our child. I have wronged you. Being by his side all these years, it was the first time I heard him speak to me like this, using I instead of we in his royal capacity, speaking with such tired and sorrowful tone. He is the most exalted person in the world, but at that moment, he was as weak and sad as any ordinary father who had lost a child. That foolishly affectionate gaze, that deep and bone-deep sorrow and pity, instantly triggered my grief. He did not refer to himself as we, showing the depth of his pain. I couldn't bear to say more, burying my face in his embrace and crying heart-wrenchingly. Those were my tears and also my endless hatred and pain. Xianling, stroking my back, said, Why did you have to listen to her that day, to kneel when told, to be punished when told? He paused, somewhat resentful towards Consort Jing. Consort Jing was also present at that time. Why didn't you seek help from her? Your Majesty knows the nature of Lady Murong. How could Consort Jing persuade her? And how could I possibly resist by myself? Moreover, under the circumstances that day, it was better to comply than to resist, or else it would give her more excuses to pressure me. I spoke with bitter helplessness. So, Your Majesty, why then did you grant her such great authority to manage the affairs of the harem? You knew she was vicious-hearted. Sister May's case was the best example. Xianling, pressed by my questioning, slumped and after a moment said, Are you blaming me? I shook my head. How dare I? Crying had exhausted me, leaving me drained of energy. Xianling, too, hadn't shed a tear but was evidently weary. The sleeping chamber was eerily silent, filled with a somber stillness. He solemnly swore, I swear our child's death will not be in vain. I will surely bring you justice. I looked at him earnestly. Then when can I expect a definite answer from Your Majesty? He remained silent for a moment before saying, The day will come. I sighed softly, lowering my head. The pain of losing a child may fade with time, but seeing Lady Murong every day, how can I bear it? And Your Majesty might not forget past affections. He had no answer, only saying, Huan, for my sake, please endure a little longer and do not make things difficult for me. Filled with disappointment, I turned away from him, tears unconsciously slipping down. My pillow was damp and warm. I lay down, my pillow soaked with tears.
Follow us to avoid getting lost and enjoy endless exciting stories. For more content, please go to the Story Wall homepage to view more exciting novels.